Welcome everyone. We're so glad you're here today. I really appreciate you coming. We've got a very important week this week for the Fall Summit that's going to be hosted by TransformSC, and we hope that one day when we look back on this event that we'll see that something was really big and important that happened here in South Carolina. I'm Pamela Lackey, the president of AT&T in South Carolina and the co-chair of TransformSC. With me today is Mike Brennan, who's the president of BB&T South Carolina and our co-chair, and Jim Reynolds, who's the CEO of Total Comfort Solutions and a board member of TransformSC. But the most important people here today are the folks who are standing with us. They represent the 19 school districts and 35 schools across the state that are on the cutting edge of transforming public education. They're our first group of TransformSC Schools. TransformSC is dedicated to just that, transforming public education to prepare students for the demands of the 21st century and for that first 21st century marketplace. We're business people, we're educators, we're parents, we're students from all parts of the state, all political persuasions, varied backgrounds, but we see the future. The education model we have now, which was developed decades ago, has pretty much served us well, but it was designed in an era of the manual typewriter and pencils. We must design a new system now that reflects the new realities of life in our economy today. While we encompass all stakeholders, this is a business-driven initiative. If South Carolina is going to enjoy the prosperity that we all want, we have to make sure that our workforce is driving economic development. We've got to make sure we have the workers that can make us successful. While South Carolina has made progress, a quarter of our students still drop out of school, and about 41% of high school graduates require remediation before they begin their college-level courses at either technical schools, and that costs taxpayers about $21 million a year. That's not sustainable for businesses or for families or for the students. Business needs students who have mastered science and technology and engineering and math and the arts. But we also need employees with the soft skills who know how to collaborate and work in teams, and how to solve problems and practice good citizenship. Those of us here today, and many educators across the state who aren't here, understand that the classroom must mirror those realities. TransformSC is not starting a new movement. There are pockets of innovation happening in the state right now, but we want to help speed things up by providing our partners with technical support and networking opportunities and advocacy. It's our job to support our schools as they move towards transformation. This means transforming the classroom where teachers have the flexibility to work with individual students, and students are allowed to move on to more complex assignments only after they've mastered the task before them. It means project-based learning where students work in teams with the technologies they need, just like businesses do every day. It also means continual assessment of student progress instead of just a once-a-year test. We need to know where they are as they move along. Our educational partners with us today all submitted plans for what they want to do in their districts and their schools, and we had a committee of experts who vetted the plans. Other school districts have expressed interest in partnering with us in the future, and for a variety of reasons they just didn't do so right now. It's important to understand that the idea of transforming education is coming from the grassroots up, from the parents, from the educators and business people who know their communities and understand what their children need to succeed. All of our research and focus groups have shown us this. Mike Brennan, president of BB&T, is our other co-chair. So I'm going to, I'm going to ask Mike now to give you a more complete overview of exactly what we're doing. Mike?
Thank you, Pam. As Pam said, I'm Mike Brennan. I'm the president of BB&T and the co-chair of Transform South Carolina. Let me first of all begin by saying how thankful I am to have the unique opportunity to stand with other business leaders and particularly to stand with the educators that are behind us today. I've got to know many of these folks over the last year, and we clearly have educators that are committed to transforming public education. As I travel South Carolina, I frequently hear employers emphatically say that they need workers with post-high school training. They say they need people capable of continuing to adapt to new technologies, work in teams to solve problems, and live as responsible, honest citizens who benefit their families, the employers, and their communities. Let me point out that it's estimated by 2020 that 60% of all jobs will require some form of education beyond high school. Failure to adapt to these demands is not an option if South Carolina is to be a place where businesses and families want to live and to work. This systematic change requires collaboration between business leaders, policymakers, educators, parents, and students. And for the first time in decades, these groups all agree we need to transform education in order to transform South Carolina. Transform South Carolina's mission is to provide support, networking, and advocacy to districts and schools as they lead the way to the 21st century schools. TransformSC's professional team is led by our project manager, Moya Jackson. Moya is here with us today. Moya, thank you for being here, and thank you for your leadership and guidance, along with numerous other professionals who are committed to this effort. Moya and her team will be working with 35 public schools and 19 districts throughout South Carolina. These schools are partners with TransformSC and are committed to retooling teaching models that will prepare students for the demands of the 21st century marketplace. Leading the support of this transformational renaissance in our state are businesses like Blue Cross Blue Shield, Michelin, the State Chamber of Commerce, AT&T, Total Comfort Systems, and my own BB&T. These business leaders are joined by educators including the South Carolina School Boards Association, the South Carolina Superintendents Association, among others. And most encouraging is that polling shows that these businesses and education leaders are joined by 74% of South Carolina parents who agree it's time to rethink how public education works in order to improve it. This broad collaboration inspired from the ground up is what gives me great confidence that we've begun to move our state in the right direction. As we have said time and time again, we must transform South Carolina today because tomorrow won't wait for our students. It's now my pleasure to ask Jim Reynolds to come visit and share a unique experience that he had recently. Jim?
Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure to be with you today. It helps when we're talking about transforming education for me, it helps to see an example of it. And we have today with our 19 districts and 34 schools a myriad of innovations, but there is one that I was particularly interested in, and it's the New Tech High School model, which is project-based learning. We have two districts, Colleton, Leela's here, which is a rural community, and Lexington too, and Venus is here today. But the project-based learning model is modeled after a school, Anson New Tech High School, up in Anson County, North Carolina. We took a busload of educators and business leaders up to visit that school. Their graduation rate had been below 60%, stuck at that level. And the superintendent and the board said, we're going to try something totally different. And they transitioned from the traditional lecture and rote memory system to a project-based learning system. As we went through that school and visited the classroom after classroom, what we saw were teams of students, and about teams of 6. And all of them were working on projects. They had laptops in front of them. They were doing their research. One of the math classes we went into, they were designing a zoo. And they'd done the research to determine how much space each animal needed. And then they were using geometry and algebra to figure out how do we design that particular enclosure. And one of the students sitting at the table that we were looking at leaned over to his buddy and said, I'm having trouble figuring the area for this enclosure. And he said, well, let me help you. And they got together and worked on the computer and got that done. And the student sitting next to him looked up at us, the adults, and said, I bet when you were in high school they call that cheating. And we laughed and we did, and they did. But today in the business world, we call that working in teams and collaboration, which is the way we're globally competitive today. As we went through that school from class to class, we saw exactly the same thing, whether it was an English class or history class or a Spanish class. It was all students working in teams, doing the research, critical thinking, creative problem solving, great oral and written communication skills, and those students had confidence. We talked to the teacher. She said, I'd been the old model of teaching for 15 years. I was really worried, would these students get it? Would they learn if I'm not lecturing to them? And she said, I very quickly found out that they learned more and faster and more deeply because they were totally engaged in what they were learning. The results at that school that was exhibiting 60% graduation rate, for 6 years running now, test scores have gone up dramatically and graduation rates are consistently above 90%. That's a model that has transformed education, project-based learning. One of the CEOs who was on that trip, as he came out of those classes, he said, you know, it just occurred to me that these classrooms look like my office, where I've got teams of people working on problems, doing the research, coming up with solutions, and meeting deadlines. He said, I would hire any one of these kids because they've lived in that environment for a 4-year period. And that's one of the models that we're looking at for TransformSC. The vision for TransformSC is exactly that, to rethink how we do education so that it is learner-centered. The districts that are here today and the schools that are downstairs working on these projects are looking at a myriad of innovations, one of which I've described today. But they're all focused on how do students learn and how do we fundamentally change the K-12 system so that it is serving the needs of students the best for their learning and prepares them with the knowledge and the skills and the character and the attitudes that they will need to be successful in the 21st century in life and in careers. These districts will be sharing information on the different projects that they're running so that everybody can understand what's working and what's not and how do we change that and how do we transform K-12 in South Carolina.